Everything looks good.
Just so you can all see, we have
They have to sit in here.
Vicky and Archie and Ajay and Arvin. You guys should,
Hello, everyone.
should see Arvin.
Good morning. It's good to see you all.
Hey, good to see you.
Archie's already grown, but Arvin is growing. He really is. I think you're gonna be tall.
I think so.
I think you're gonna be like your brother, maybe even taller, who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway,
He's growing up.
yeah. Okay. Now, back to the Dharma. It's all Dharma, right?
Okay.
All right,
We'll
you-
start the prayers and we'll begin with the idea that we're shaping our minds in the direction of altruism and our wish to be of benefit to the cosmos, to the sentient beings in the cosmos, and to ourselves, and to only add positive energy and positive words and actions, only positive ones, for the benefit of the whole cosmos. And we're doing that in this wonderful Mahayana path that Lord Buddha laid out for us, which is a wonderful recipe to do just that, to add only positive goodness and great qualities to the cosmos and be an asset to the cosmos instead of any other possibility, which are endless. So, with that in mind,
Endless assets.
well, we will take refuge and generate bodhicitta. Let's go ahead and just chant it in Tibetan. Sangye chodon soki choknam la chanchu padu kati kyasuchi naki chinyan ipe sonaki Rola and sheer sangye druparsho. Now, for the benefit of all the insects and microorganisms in the environment within which you are residing, chant this nice and loudly so that you can plant seeds into all those sentient beings in your environment. Sangye
Chodam soki chodam la
Chang
Jamchu bardu dagni kyasushi
Dagi
Nagi shenyen gipe sonam gi Drola penshir sangye druparsho
Sangye
Chodam soki chodam la
Changchu
Bardu dagni kyasuchi Dagi chenyen gipe sonam gi Rola benshir sangye druparsho.
and visualize all the sentient beings, the microorganisms, the large organisms, the organisms all surrounding you throughout this building you're in, the town you're in, the country you're in, the cosmos you're in, surrounded by all the sentient beings who, like you, wish for happiness. And so we are on this path to discover and actualize the causes of happiness. And so we say the four immeasurables as active participants in making these aspiring thoughts become the reality throughout our world and beyond. So we say, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And just picture yourself as an active agent in making this become the case for an expanding number of sentient beings through your actions of body, speech, and mind, sharing your positivity, sharing Dharma, sharing all the good, establishing sentient beings in these states. And now call to mind and imagine, just like the sentient beings surrounding you, holy beings of all levels of enlightenment up and down the path to enlightenment are surrounding us. Wise, altruistic, enlightened Buddhas, Bodhisattvas are surrounding us, and we invite them to be part of our thinking and discussion. We're inviting them to where we are in this place, in this time, to inspire and support our sincere efforts to be jewels of the Dharma in our lives and in our circles of impact. And out of gratitude and sincere enthusiasm for our joy having found this marvelous path and these wonderful guides and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that surround us and are in front of us, we are going to recite the lines of the seven-limb prayer to them as a way of restating our understanding and appreciation for what the Dharma brings to our existence and those that we impact. Huge shift in the paradigm within which we live by adopting this Dharma, and without these precious jewels of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that we say this to, we couldn't do this. So with that in mind, the seven-limb prayer, reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds, every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and I rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And all the enlightened Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and everything that is good and altruistic in the universe is very happy that we're part of their team, if you will. Okay, so as Buddhist practitioners, what can we do? We can shape our mind, and as we know from even modern psychology, that the thoughts that we hold become reality. That's how we actualize everything in our lives. So the thoughts that we think and that we cultivate and the thoughts that we hold are what result in our actions. And so this thought, the mandala offering, is a potent medicine for ourselves and for the whole cosmos, because we're using our thoughts to establish our trajectory, to establish the direction we're moving. And to do that, we have to visualize the purified universe that we are participating in the creation of. So we must visualize something pure and wonderful, filled with enlightened, happy, creative beings, all good, 100% altruistic, 100% validating the importance of life and kindness. This is the universe we envision. And so we'll use the lines, we'll chant it in Tibetan. Do we have it? Yeah. In Tibetan, we'll do the little melody. And while you're chanting the melody, just envision something so marvelous that you're participating in the creation of. Saji praki joshi Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kandiriya. And off we go, headed in that direction.
Okay, continuing in this mode, we'll start right in with opening shamatha meditation practice. And remember, the purpose of shamatha meditation is to develop a very focused and flexible mind that that is calm and is in a continuous state of consciousness that is characterized as being blissful, still, and extremely vivid. Shamatha is a powerful tool of the mind that enables the mind to maintain and hold in place a very clear, alert, and stable awareness that is free from distraction. So we begin by adopting the 7-point posture, starting from the bottom up. The legs are crossed or in a comfortable position, or if that's not comfortable for you, your legs can just be bent at the knees with your feet on the floor, sitting in a chair. Your hands can rest in your lap in this mudra of the unification of compassion and wisdom. Or if that's not comfortable for you for some reason, you can put your hands just on your knees like this. Either are okay. Your back, you want to keep the spine straight. Shoulders and elbows, the shoulders should be level. The elbows are slightly away from the body. The head and the neck are straight. The chin is slightly tucked in and lowered. The face is relaxed, and that the tip of the tongue is placed against the upper palate behind the upper front teeth. And your eyes are barely opened and gazing just past the tip of your nose, sort of down to the floor in front of you. Let our body be relaxed and natural. If you get tight in any certain areas, just take a deep breath and exhale the tension with the next out breath. So again, we want to cultivate the altruistic attitude of bodhicitta, that wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all living beings. And we set a motivation that is something along these lines. With this meditation practice, may we develop the capacity of our consciousness to maintain clear and focused awareness, that we may awaken our stable compassion and wisdom for the benefit of all beings. So now we're going to go into a practice suggested by Khentrul Rinpoche, and this is a breathing practice designed for relaxation, but keeping the mind very alert. There are preliminaries, so while blocking your left nostril, breathe deeply through your right nostril. Now block your right nostril, and as you slowly exhale through your left, release all your worries and concerns related to attachment and desire. Repeat this 2 more times. Now reverse the process. While blocking your right nostril, breathe deeply through your left nostril. As you release, exhale through your left nostril, slowly let out all of your worries and concerns related to aversion and fear. Repeat this 2 more times. In with the left, aversion and fear out with the right. And finally, breathe through both nostrils. As you release the breath, release all your concerns about confusion and ignorance. And do that 2 more times. So this is the main practice that's suggested by Khentrul Rinpoche now. Perform a brief scan of your body from top to bottom, releasing all tensions through the out-breath. Let your awareness fill your entire body and have it be relaxed and loose. Become aware of the tactile sensations that correspond to your in and out breath. These may include the rise and fall of the chest or the abdomen, or the feeling of the air moving through your nostrils. It doesn't matter, simply identify the sensations which indicate that you are breathing. Now take on the mental attitude of an impartial observer. Watch how these sensations develop over time. Particularly, pay attention to the relative duration of each phase of the in and out breath. Make a mental note when they're long or when they are short. If you find that your mind starts to become filled with many thoughts, then you can generate a very specific thought by counting the breaths. At the very end of the in-breath, mentally count 1. Then release all effort on the out-breath. Again, watching the breath flow in, count 2, and again release on the out-breath. Repeat this process, counting up to 10. When the mind has calmed down, stop counting and simply return to observing the relative duration of each breath. Now, as we approach the end of this very short meditation session, release all efforts and rest in the present moment. So we can end it there. I think what I take from this is that Khenpo Rinpoche has provided a very skillful way of relaxing yourself, keeping your mind alert because you're focused on your breath, but getting yourself in a place where you can get to the present moment without all of these distractions. And if distractions come up, you follow the breath, you do the counting. So this is helping us to sort of create that shamatha space, the space where we can have a very focused, stable, clear, vivid awareness that can then analyze something, really focus on something and analyze it. So I find that to be very easy to do. It's very skillful, and I find that I remain quite alert doing it because Khenpo Rinpoche is keeping your mind busy with the right kinds of things to get you in the right frame of mind. So I find that to be a really good introduction to shamatha and creating that space. So before we go on, or we're going to now have to think about some wisdom topics, let's just do a round of the Manjushri mantra. As you know, we were talking about, as Kavita was saying in the opening prayers, the purpose of Buddhism, the purpose of the Buddhist teachings is that we and all sentient beings may be happy and that we don't suffer. And what that's going to require for us to be able to do this is going to require some wisdom that understands the way things actually exist. And compassion will not be stable without wisdom. So this mudra that they talk about, the mudra of the union of compassion and wisdom, the left hand represents wisdom. The left always represents the wisdom. This would be the feminine aspect that we all have. The right represents compassion or the methods that you employ to be of benefit. This would be called a masculine energy, but we all have it. So this energy of helping, the energy that of compassion and the methods that can help has to be supported by wisdom. It is supported in the hand that's wisdom. That's the purpose of that mudra. They come together. So why we're saying the Manjushri prayers to remind us of that, to remind us that the wisdom is extremely important in this process. So we'll just do a round of the Om A Ra Pa Sa Na Di. And at the end of that, we'll go D, 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 which represents the awakening of our inner wisdom, or an inner understanding of the nature of the way things exist. That's what Manjushri is about. But the purpose is to be of benefit. The purpose is to be happy and to not suffer. That's why the wisdom is there. It's not just to know how things work, okay? So here we go. Om Rabatsana Di, 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 Om Rabatsana Di. Batsana Di, Om Rabatsana Di, Om Rabatsana Di, Om Rabatsana Di, Om Rabatsana Di. Batsana Di, Om Rabatsana 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 Di. Batsana Di, Om Rabatsana 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 Di. Batsana Di, Om Rabatsana Di, 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 some of you may recall the Manjushri figure, and just as a reminder, Manjushri is holding a sword, a double-edged sword, over his with his right hand over above his head, and the two edges of the sword, of course, come to a point and they meet, and that is surrounded by a flame, which is indicating that these it really is talking about the two truths, which is the subject that we're on, that there is conventional truth and ultimate truth, but they actually are two isolates of one entity, which we were talking about recently. So the Manjushri, even the figure of Manjushri is showing how we need to bring these two truths together to understand the nature of reality. And then the other hand, of course, he's holding at his heart a stem of a lotus, and the lotus is opened up at his left ear, the wisdom ear, which means listening to these teachings and contemplating these teachings on emptiness is going to be the key to understanding the nature of reality. So that's the basic symbolism of Manjushri. So now we're going to go back to talk about the two truths. And the two truths are also called truths, or the truth, conventional truth, I should say, conventional truth. So this conventional truth is ultimate truth. Conventional truth is often called the truth that conceals, or it's a concealer truth. So in other words, if I'm holding up this book, this book, Dharma book, this we would say is a conventional, it conventionally exists. The way it appears to us, it appears as if it exists from its own side. It's its own independent, self-existing thing. That's the part that's concealing. It's concealing the actual nature of what this is. And we went through this. This whole book is completely a dependent arising. It arises due to all kinds of causes and conditions, not just material ones, but also our own cognition. Our own cognition is designating what this book is, what the words inside mean, what the letters stand for. This is all, it's huge. And as we discussed last time, when you really take it all the way, it goes to the edges of the universe and beyond. It goes to the levels of consciousness and cognition. So this book here is concealing actually the ultimate truth that's contained right there, if we know what we're looking for. So this is why the conventional truths are called concealer truths. Concealer truths. This is a lot of this is from Geshe Tashi Tseri, who I've been looking at quite a bit on this because he's very good, and he's a qualified Tibetan Geshe.
I just heard the other day, he's currently the abbot of Sarah, I don't know if it's J or Sarah May Monastery.
Geshe Tseri is the abbot of Sarah Jane. For years he was teaching in England, and so his English is terrific. His understanding of the language that we speak is thorough, which is why he's such a great source for this. So he says these truths that conceal, which are conventional truths, they create a fictitious world that works for us on a certain level. For instance, we fly airplanes to go to places, and those are very real to us. We eat food, and that food is very real to us. Those are conventional truths. The food, the airplanes, the air we breathe, all of that is conventional truth, and it's very real to us. And we have a very strong sense of what we think is real and what we think is not real. For instance, we think Disneyland is real. Mickey Mouse is not. And this is the way we think. Some people think that the news is real, and some people think the news is not. So this is where we can get into some trouble. Some things we're quite sure about. I think we're sure about Mickey Mouse, and I think we're sure that Disneyland is an actual place we can go to. But I don't think we're sure about the news anymore. And this is happening on both sides. People are not sure anymore. So this is showing there's some playing around going, and we need to be very clear of how this works. So there are some fuzzy areas, like I was just saying, where we're not sure about the reality of things. But in general, we feel like we can distinguish between reality and fiction. But Geshe Tsering says at one level, it's all fiction. It's all fiction at one level. The real world may cause us pleasure or tears that somehow seem different from the pleasure or tears that we experience in a movie, like we were talking about last time. But in a sense, they're the same. In spite of this, in the relative world of conventionalities, all things and events, including our own sense of self, appear very independent and solid. According to the Madhyamaka middle way school, all sentient beings possess this ignorance equally. All sentient beings. So we're talking about at every level, hell beings, hungry ghosts, insects, animals, humans, gods, demigods, and space aliens, you know. They all have a sense, any sentient being has a sense, this ignorant sense that their I and who they are exists independently. And we sort of come that way. But because of this particular kind of ignorance, we are able to see, we're able to feel, and we're able to function. Because of all of this, you know, even though we may be mistaken about all the way all of these things exist, yet we have developed a system, a world in which we live, in which all of these are quite functional. We know what they stand for, we know what they are, we know what to do with them. If we weren't able to do that, nothing could happen. If we weren't able to interact and function with things, everything would be frozen. So there is a functionality to the conventional world and the way it appears to us and the way it exists. It allows us to function. What we need to understand is, what is it actually concealing? What are they talking about when they're saying concealing? Concealing the actual nature of what is, because it's what causes all the problems. Specifically, when we go back to the sense that I, which every sentient being has, the sense that I have an independent self-existence, so therefore I am extremely important to me. I and anything that's mine is the center of my existence and, you might say, universe. Then all of these other things are fine as long as they don't get in the way of what I want. Once they get in the way of what I want, then all of the afflictive emotions arise. And this is what the Buddha is talking about. How do we stop the suffering? We have to understand the way things actually exist in order to do that. The conceptual mind is not necessarily a negative mind. We should think that the conceptual mind is a negative mind. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, we have to have concepts in order to refute inherent existence and have an understanding of emptiness. We need concepts to be able to do that. Without concepts, we wouldn't be able to understand anything, let alone, you know, the nature of reality. Without a concept, we wouldn't even understand what these are, you know? We need the concepts. We need to know what it is. This is why when ancient cultures experienced things for the first time, for instance, I think it was Japan. The very first time the people of Japan saw British ships coming to Japan via the ocean, they had no context for what that was, other than it was some kind of sea creature. So they believed that that was some kind of dragon-type sea creature when they first saw those, because the concepts weren't there for them. This is similar to our understanding of emptiness and the nature of reality. Why it's difficult. The concepts aren't innate within us. We have to develop those concepts to a point where they're not so foreign, we become habituated to them, and we begin to understand what the wisdom teachings are talking about, so that we can use them to generate a beneficial existence for ourselves and for others. I think that would be the best way to put it. So concepts can help us. They can help us greatly reduce our ignorance and the suffering that arises from it. That is the point of many of the practices that we do. The practice in the seven limb practice, where you're practicing turning around your negative thoughts and replacing them with positive thoughts and actions. That's very, very conceptual what we're doing, but it's helpful. It makes a difference. It changes the way we think, and that's important because, as Kavita was saying, everything we do arises from a thought we have. So if we can change the way we think, we're going to change the way we speak, the way we act. So concepts are extremely important. We're using concepts right now. We have to. There's no other way. But conceptual thinking is not the final method for dealing with the problem. And the problem, of course, is suffering. Suffering, confusion, ignorance. The suffering that arises from that ignorance. So the concepts will take us to a point, and they're very beneficial. But the final method for dealing with the problem is not conceptual. The real solution will come from direct perception, direct non-conceptual perception, not from the conceptual mind. But right now we are a long way, like 1,000,000 miles away from having some kind of being a yogic direct perceiver, is the way they call it, like these incredibly accomplished meditators who in the caves of Tibet centuries ago did this for years and came to a direct realization of the nature of reality, and they were called yogic direct perceivers. We're a long way from that. We don't have a cave to go to. We have a life to live, and bills to pay and all of that kind of stuff. And so we're doing the best we can, and I think we can make huge progress this way. Currently, we live in a familiar world that is permeated by our ignorant view. And that ignorant view is that everything exists the way it appears to us, sort of independent, self-existing. And the world is permeated by that view. If we get rid of our ignorance, Geshe Tsering says, well, what sort of world will we have? And he says that can be a very daunting question and challenging. So our life, our feelings, all of our communications only seem to happen within the sphere of relative truth or conventional truth. That's where everything seems to happen for us. And so if we have a realization of ultimate truth, does that mean that the conventional world will go away? That there'll be nothing there? Because the conventional world right now, as we know it to be, is all there is for us. And that's the key, as we know it to be. So we need to learn another way of seeing the conventional world, conventional existence. And that's what we're doing with these teachings. The Madhyamaka school, Madhyamaka means middle way, and that is the highest philosophical group of tenets in Buddhism. The Madhyamaka school's philosophical view is said to be right on the brink of nihilism. We talked a little bit about this last week. Tibetan masters also often use the term standing on the edge of a sword, And Geshe Dragpa Gelik used to say, the Madhyamaka, particularly the Prasangika Madhyamaka view, the highest view, is like walking a tightrope. You don't get the balance right, and you're going to fall off one or the other edge. It's walking a tightrope. So this is it's a very, very subtle view that exists. All of the Tibetan masters and the Buddhist masters tell us that realizing ultimate truth is not going to be like having been in a dark room that immediately becomes bright when we switch on the light. It's going to be more like in a very, very dark room, and gradually that dark room is getting lighter and lighter. Like you have a dimmer switch and it's going really, really slow. So gradually you begin to make out things in the darkness, and it gets lighter and lighter until finally, when we have the full view of the way things exist, is completely bright. We can see everything the way it is. So they say it's going to be a gradual process. So we're doing fine. We're right on schedule. Our ignorance will be removed with the process of gradually substituting other non-ignorant states of consciousness, like gradually raising the light in a dark room. We slowly eliminate our delusions until we reach a state of cessation, which for a bodhisattva is liberation from the suffering of cyclic existence and enlightenment that is free from all cognitive and afflictive obscurations. That's what the bodhisattva is aiming for. Liberation from the suffering of cyclic existence and an enlightened mind that is free from all afflictive and cognitive obscurations, which allows you to be of benefit, allows the bodhisattva to be of benefit as a Buddha to all sentient beings. So that's what the bodhisattva is going for. And an enlightened being, that kind of being does not exist in a state of nothingness. That enlightened being is very active and being of benefit. That's the point. So as I've said before, the only kind of existence there actually is a conventional kind of existence. Ultimate existence is synonymous with basically, how would you say it? Inherent existence. Ultimate existence is synonymous with independent self-existence, and that kind of thing doesn't exist. So there's a big difference between ultimate existence and conventional existence, and ultimate truth and conventional truth, which we will get to. So even a Buddha then, a bodhisattva, an enlightened being, has a conventional existence in which they can function and interact and be of benefit. It's not like going into a state of some kind of cessation where, nothing happens. It's quite active.
So Christopher,
Yeah.
can I ask, so who defines or what is defined as the criteria that one moves through along this process? For example, a yogi, a bodhisattva, a true Buddha. I mean, who makes that assessment? Is it the individual themselves? Is there some other process that exists that says, well, if you remove enough obscurations and you're 99% there, you're, a bodhisattva, but you're not a Buddha yet. I mean, who actually makes that determination?
This came from the Buddha. It came from the Buddha. It came from the Buddha's own experience. And then by others following the Buddha all throughout the centuries, like some of these great yogis who've had these direct, perceptions, they've identified the process that they go through in each stage. And so they've been very helpful in this way. Particularly when you look at the way the Tibetans did this. They were sticklers about getting all the information. They got all the information from Nalanda Monastery in India. They paid good money to get it up there. And then they held on to it, and they added to it as their own their practitioners, their monks, their yogis developed, and they would confirm that these are the states that we're going through. This is what we've realized. This is what happens, and so that's what we have to go on. Is those who have gone before us.
But I mean, in a way, I mean, if I was answering Brian's question, and maybe this is a point of discussion, but the question of like who decides you're a bodhisattva, well, it's kind of like saying who decides you can run a marathon.
Right.
I mean, once you have developed the capacity to run a marathon,
Then
you are a marathon runner. So if you understand if one looks into the qualities that are ascribed to bodhisattvahood, then when one is actualized those qualities, then one would say one would just be a bodhisattva.
Right.
So, I mean, I think same with yogis. I mean, these are just terms that we use to clump together the development of particular qualities.
That's a very good point that Kavita is making, and I would just add to that. It's every say how do you determine somebody is a very accomplished musician? Well, we all have to go. As a musician, I just know from my own experience, and I would not consider myself a very accomplished musician.
It's by the music they play.
It's how they learn how to play. their instrument or whatever it is. They have training that comes from their teachers or the people who they are sort of studying with or copying or, you know, are influenced by. And that comes to a point where everybody sort of acknowledges, wow, you're phenomenal. What you're doing is amazing. They have reached this level. So they themselves know, and everybody else kind of knows, they can see it. So it's, you know, so you go, what is the criteria? What's the criteria for being a great basketball player, a great musician? What's the criteria for being, you know, a bodhisattva or an enlightened being? It's very, very similar. The process that one goes through is a very similar process, and it's something that you yourself recognize, and it is a pathway that others recognize and it will acknowledge. Does that make sense? Because it's not different than, you know, getting your degree or becoming a great basketball player or playing the piano and being accomplished at it or being a bodhisattva. You
Well, I
know?
guess I think in many of those examples, there are clearly some level of, you know, standards or agreement conventionally, I guess, in some respects about what talent is or talent isn't, or what musical talent is or what, you know, sports talent is or isn't. And that's fine. And as long as the same kind of structure exists through the centuries and learnings and the path, and, you know, you have these various stages of paths, and as you accomplish each stage, you move forward, that's okay. I mean, if that's the process, that's the process. The thing that I keep coming back to, though, is we have you talk about, and maybe this is just the language, you talk about this non-conceptual realization of emptiness. So it's basically, you know it when it happens, and you know it when you see it, but it's, you know it when you see it, whereas somebody sitting next to you may say, well, no, that's not emptiness. That's not, you haven't really realized emptiness yet, or you think you have and you're telling me you have, but no, you really haven't. And as I think more broadly about our, you know, civilization, that, you know, or society, we have a lot of people who think about things in lots of different ways, who have very strong convictions and beliefs that their way of thinking is the correct way of thinking. So in some sense, I was just asking if there's some objective, independent, non I guess non-conceptual, I'll use that, although it's not quite the word I want, criteria that you need to be qualified as a bodhisattva or a Buddha. Because, you know, we've got people who walk around and say, well, you know, I'm God, I'm, you know, the latest incarnation of God. And that person, I'm sure, believes it for whatever reason, but it's not true. So
Right.
I'm just kind of asking in the same way, you know, is there some objective?
Is there some governing authority?
Well, you know, the way we do
Board
it,
of Buddhas.
the way we do it conventionally, you know, if somebody goes around saying, I'm God, well, everybody will go, really? How do you prove that? You know, show me. How do you prove it? You know, and if they can't show it, if they can't prove it, and other consciousnesses say, I don't see that this person is God, then it's not valid. You know, you have to have, because there's no objective anything apart from consciousness. You cannot have an objective anything.
I'm gonna just, I'm butting in because there's a few obvious things they say. That anyone who walks around claiming they're a yogi isn't. Anyone who walks around claiming they're a bodhisattva isn't. Anyone who walks around claiming they're a Buddha isn't. I mean, it's.
You know what I have found the greatest artists, the greatest musicians, the greatest athletes are very modest. They don't go around proclaiming how great they
So
are.
I think in a way, I mean, I'm not exactly sure. I understand in one sense what's troubling you, Brian, because you're looking for an objective way to be able to identify and in a sense nail down what's reality and what's fantasy, perhaps, you know, anyway. And, you know, we can't all just say, you know, especially in your world of science and research, we can't all just say what we want about how things work. Though, as we know from all this crazy experimentation in quantum physics and beyond, that these things are a lot more elastic and
Right.
malleable than we would like to think.
Tsongkhapa has some. I'll go back to this again. The only kind of existence there is conventional existence, and without a consciousness, there cannot be any criteria developed. So the consciousness is the one that has to do this within a conventional existence. And Tsongkhapa talks about the three criteria for determining whether something is a valid conventional truth, or a valid conventional reality, or a valid conventional existence. There are three criteria, which we will get to today. And that addresses your question, because there is no, you cannot isolate some objective thing out there apart from consciousness. It won't happen. And so we have to find another way to do that than just say there's some, I like set in stone, the objective thing that says you are enlightened when boom, 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 this happens. It won't be like that. You know, it's a different model that's actually more in line with the way things are. So we'll go on,
So,
because
Chris,
yeah,
if somebody tells you that you're enlightened, would the ego play in you saying that, oh, I'm enlightened, right?
I don't think so.
That would,
I mean, if you had a very big ego, you might be puffed up for a while, going, "Hey, I'm enlightened," until you found out you weren't.
yeah.
You know, because an enlightened being, I mean, look at the things they say an enlightened being is omniscient. You know, well, right there, you know, every ego is going to fall flat. They can only hold up a show of omniscience for so long. You know, just as someone who's not a really, you know, great musician and not a great singer can get by a lot with AI these days. But after a certain point, when it's taken away from them, it'll be quite clear they're not the great performer that we all thought they might be, or that they're claiming to be. You know, so there's a lot of deception going on, and there always has been, and we have to be quite aware of that. So let's continue so we can get to the criteria that you're asking about. How things exist conventionally, how they actually exist. The most subtle view of the Buddhist tenets is held by the Madhyamaka school, as we said. This school consists of two sub-schools. It's the Svatantrika Madhyamaka and the Prasangika Madhyamaka. The Svatantrika, it means autonomous. So in other words, they say, the Svatantrika Madhyamakas say there is something in some part of conventional existence, that there is some independent self-existence there. From part of it, and another part is not. The Prasangikas say, no, there's no independent self-existence whatsoever. So this is where they differ. The Svatantrikas assert that phenomena exist by way of their own character conventionally, but not ultimately. The Prasangikas, who have the most subtle view of the schools, do not assert that phenomena exist by way of their own character, even conventionally. And I think, you know, when we discussed this book last week and took it out to where you know, how it's the kind of dependent arising it is, we can see that it actually, even conceptually, we can see that it doesn't exist independently the way it appears. The Prasangika Madhyamika's crucially important assertion that all things and events lack any intrinsic or inherent nature is such a subtle one that confusion easily arises regarding the difference between inherent existence and existence itself. While agreeing that things lack true existence, Svatantrika Madhyamika masters, such as Bhavaviveka, insist that there has to be some kind of essential nature, and to assert the lack of inherent existence is the same as asserting non-existence. So in other words, the Svatantrikas think if you say something lacks inherent existence, independent self-existence, it's the same as saying it doesn't exist, period. That's the way the Svatantrikas see it. The Prasangikas do not see it that way. So Lama Tsongkhapa, he wrote a great treatise on the stages of the path on Lam Rim. And in that book, he says all this is extremely difficult. As this is extremely difficult, accurate understanding of the presentation of the two truths hardly exists. So Tsongkhapa, at Tsongkhapa's time, he's saying, it's very, very difficult to find an accurate representation of these two truths. So to begin to understand how the Prasangika Madhyamikas assert that things and events exist, it's necessary to differentiate between conventional truth and conventional existence. The Prasangikas say that to exist ultimately is to truly exist, to independently, inherently self-exist. And the Prasangikas assert that nothing exists that way. Nothing exists inherently, independently. But to exist conventionally is to exist dependent on causes and conditions. That state of empty interdependence is the mode of existence of all things, including all conventional truths and ultimate truths. Conventional truths and ultimate truths are all in a state of empty interdependence. That is their mode. The division between the Svatantrikas and the Prasangikas comes with the most subtle view of existence, that of inherent existence. While both of the sub-schools agree that all phenomena have some level of conventional truth, nature, and ultimate truth, nature, the Prasangikas further assert that ultimate existence and inherent existence are synonymous, as I said before. Ultimate existence and inherent existence are synonymous, and nothing exists inherently or independently. Since this distinction is such a fine one, and since all the other schools of tenets see lack of inherent existence as meaning non-existence, then it becomes incumbent upon the Prasangikas to explain exactly how things do exist conventionally. This is explained by Lama Tsongkhapa in his great treatise on the stages of the path. And here's what he says. How does one determine whether something exists conventionally? We assert that something exists conventionally if, one, and there are three of these, one, it is known to a conventional consciousness. And I'll explain these. Two, no other conventional valid cognition contradicts it being so known. And three, reason that accurately analyzes the reality of whether something inherently exists does not contradict it. So those are the three. And Tsongkhapa says, we hold that anything that fails to meet these criteria is non-existent. Tsongkhapa says that according to the Prasangika Madhyamikas, phenomena must possess these three criteria to exist conventionally. Not only must something be an object of conventional consciousness, that conventional consciousness must not be invalidated by another conventional valid cognition, nor by a mind analyzing the object's final mode of existence, its emptiness. Without these three criteria, a phenomenon cannot be said to conventionally exist. So let's look at the first criterion. The first of the three criteria states that something exists conventionally if it is known to a conventional consciousness. The conventional consciousness that's being referred to here is the kind of ordinary, worldly consciousness that occurs in all of us. All people have this, kind of, even animals. They have, beings, sentient beings have a worldly, ordinary kind of consciousness. It is a quote unquote non-analytical consciousness. It doesn't mean that consciousness never analyzes anything, but that it doesn't, but an ordinary consciousness doesn't analyze the final mode of existence of things and events. It doesn't analyze the empty nature of things in existence. An ordinary consciousness doesn't do that. To be known to a conventional consciousness means to know the existence of a thing the way we normally do, through perception and language. And you know, animals and insects and other beings, they have their own way through perception and their own forms of communication and language, whatever it may be. And that's how they know things to exist conventionally for them. Ordinarily, we know an object through our senses, and that's about as far as we go with it, including our mental sense. So we just figured there's the mental sense, the 5 sense consciousnesses, and that's that. We don't go deeper. We don't go deeper with it. Not all objects of conventional consciousness exist, however. So this criterion is not enough to determine the existence of an object. So let's now go to the second criterion for conventional existence. Any questions on the first one before we move on? Okay. The second criterion for conventional existence. The second one is no other conventional valid cognition contradicts it being so known. So it's quite possible for something to be known to an ordinary conventional consciousness, but not actually exist. There are many cultural things, good or bad, right or wrong, philosophical, religious, that are based on the construction of conventional language and that are believed to exist, but in fact do not. So let's take an example. Tashi gives an example. He talks about how many of us have a very strong unconscious belief that death will not come for at least a few years or maybe even a few decades. That non-analytical consciousness is contradicted by another valid cognition. Through analysis, we can ascertain and conclude that the time of our death is absolutely uncertain, and that we might actually die at any moment. The belief that we won't is erroneous, and it can be contradicted by valid reasoning. And I think we can all understand that particular example that he gave, and I believe that example is not controversial. So it's a good one. Because I was trying to think of some examples and going, well, that's controversial, you know, and so he's done a very good job with these examples. Here's another one he gives. He says that many, and he was living in London at the time, many London tourists who go to Baker Street looking for the house of Sherlock Holmes. And although these people actually believe that there was a Sherlock Holmes, and he is a very well-known object of cognition, people, I mean, a lot of people know the name Sherlock Holmes and what Sherlock Holmes, you know, who he was. It's not a valid belief that there is a real Sherlock Holmes. Although Sherlock Holmes is well known to the worldly mind, he does not exist as an actual person. A valid consciousness is needed to see this crucial difference between what does and what does not exist. Sherlock Holmes's existence can be disputed by a valid consciousness. Now there's another one that's a little more subtle, a little more tricky. And I was thinking of my mother, Patricia, when we were taking care of her, and she would see people up in the trees, you know, stealing her vegetables and stealing her flowers and all this kind of stuff. And she had names for them and she could see them. And to her, they were quite real, and she was getting quite angry and upset about it. Now, on a conventional level, we will all go, oh, that's dementia. That conventionally exists. Dementia itself conventionally exists. We all know that. However, all of us will say, who do not have dementia, will say, there is no actual person up in that tree stealing your vegetables. That does not exist. But dementia as a conventional reality exists. So that is a little more subtle. But you see what we're talking about. There have to be valid cognitions to say, no, that there is no real Sherlock Holmes. There is no real person in the tree. But Baker Street does exist. The address on Baker Street does exist, and dementia does exist conventionally. So that is, it takes some thinking. Any questions on that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
My mind keeps going to dependent arising, dependent origination. So, and in the beginning, when Kavita was doing the prayers, how we create what we hold in our minds. So is all of that the kind of common denominator of that it's still conventional reality of what is created with dependent origination? Does that make sense?
Yes,
I don't know
absolutely.
if it's a question, but it's a ponder that I'm
Yes,
thinking.
that is how existence arises. When we talked about the conventional layout of the book, we were very clear of all the various causes and conditions that go into it. And it's not just physical causes and conditions. It's also the way the cognition perceives the thing. These letters, figures and words and stuff in here. This is all, they don't exist from their own side as these words. We, who understand English and understand what the words and the letters are saying, have a concept that go with that. We project onto that word the concept and understand what that is. That's coming from our mind. It's not coming from nothing actually in this book is coming from the book's own side. It's all infinite causes and conditions that generate something. So this is merit. This is the I wouldn't say challenge. This is actually how we want to direct our minds. We want to direct our minds to generate the causes and conditions that are going to result in a very beneficial conventional existence. And this is what we're learning how to do. What is beneficial? What is destructive?
It's all convention, but it's all still conventional.
Everything, any kind of existence there is a conventional relative existence. The Buddha has a relative existence. Without that kind of conventional existence, you won't be able to function. You won't be able to interact. There will be no interdependent relationships. If things existed inherently, self-existent, couldn't move and flow and interact. So our job becomes, what kind of causes and conditions are we going to generate so that the experience we're having is a beneficial one, a happy one, a good one, and that it's not generating, problems and war and strife and conflict and all of the things we have going on in cyclic existence.
So Christopher, the examples you gave, there was somebody who could actually decide what is true and what is not true. Like with Sherlock Holmes, we know that's a fictional character. So does that presuppose that there's somebody who can actually make that determination and we can agree on that? Or, there are things we don't know. There's nobody who knows which side is correct.
Oh yeah, that's very difficult. When it becomes so, and I just think of like when I was mentioning before, news, the stuff that's going on. It's very difficult to know, hold on here, who's correct? They're saying outrageous things. So what's correct and what isn't correct? And we're not going to find it from the side of those who are telling the lies. We never will. So we have to, the best way I can see is you look at the logical, you use logic and you look at evidence-based, and I mean real evidence-based, not fake evidence-based.
Well, if something is undecidable,
Yeah.
what do you do with that? Then it doesn't exist conventionally?
If it's undecidable, do you have an example?
Well, it would be more in the sciences, like whether space exists, for instance, at a
Well, then it just hasn't been decided yet, because there aren't any valid cognitions yet to say this is so. That's why science is such an interesting thing, because science is constantly changing and generating and opening new doors, new windows, new ways of thinking. I mean, science is wonderful as
I
long
mean,
as
there's things in math and logic where you can prove you cannot decide the truth of a statement.
Mhm.
Do something like that.
Yeah, if there was something like that, that I couldn't tell you because I mean, and you understand math more than I do. And how do you then transfer that?
So then you just say it doesn't exist conventionally?
Well, what I would say, I'll just go back to the example of the news and how confusing that is. That actually exists, that confusion exists conventionally. It is existing conventionally. We can all see that. We can all agree, most of us can agree, that there is something really strange going on. And this division that's trying to be generated into the public based on the news that's being reported is is a conventionally existing thing. You can't deny it. It's happening. So I wouldn't say that it doesn't mean something doesn't conventionally exist. It just means it's not a valid. It's not. It has not yet been validly proven by a cognition which is the correct way. It's not as simple as Sherlock Holmes doesn't really exist as a real person, because you have a whole bunch of people saying no, it does. He does. So who are you supposed to believe? This is the dilemma we've got. So we do our
You know
best.
what? I mean, it's kind of a silly medicine that I use, but I imagine when pondering these types of questions that my understanding of the paradigm of what the universe is and how it appears to me is a large matrix type convention that I'm in, where there's galaxies and beings and planets and all that kind of stuff, and physics and math, and there's all these things that that compose our known cosmos, that are composing the cosmos known to the beings that conventionally have bought into it. And just kind of keeping that in mind, that at least hypothetically, if Buddhism is pointing at what I think it is pointing at, there are entire different ways of existing that I'm completely unaware of. And for some reason, that sort of just that much allows me to relax about some of these particular questions that we ask that seem so unsolvable, like, is there space?
Mhm.
Because for me, we're asking it from within, as we've talked many times now, the sense apparatus that we have, and the conventional belief systems and the conventional science belief systems and so forth, and the seeming experiential things that this clump of sense functions that we obtain, these spacesuits that we live in. I mean, so it helps me to just lighten up about some of these unsolvable things, to know that I can only expect so much within the realm that I'm existing
Yeah.
in.
Well, it's like we're existing within a particular paradigm, and it's very
That's what I mean.
difficult for us to get
Yeah,
out of
that's what
that.
I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I mean that's how I hear a lot of what is being discussed in this breakdown of the way we exist. And to be specific, when, for example, they talk about the 5 aggregates that compose our ordinary existence, shapes and forms, so form, sensation, discrimination, the ability to tell one thing from another, the karmic conditioning that causes us to think things are good, bad, or different, all that, and the consciousness that apprehends all this. That's just our little working package that, for beings in another realm, will have a different working package. I don't know why, but that lightens that. To have a expanded view of what is possible in all of the cosmos on the one hand seems very irrelevant and useless, and why even think about it, given the challenges that we face in our world. However, I find it somewhat liberating, because then, I don't know,
It is. Let's get to the third criterion, because we haven't gotten to that one yet.
sorry.
With only these two criterion, they'll always be at odds. They'll always be fighting one another. So the third criterion for conventional existence. The third criterion, as Lama Tsongkhapa put it, states, reason that accurately analyzes the reality of whether something inherently exists does not contradict the other two criteria. This criterion, what this criterion does is it matches the conventional consciousness with another consciousness that analyzes whether the object of analysis that we're talking about inherently exists. The first consciousness must not be contradicted by the second. The most obvious object that is contradicted in this way is the belief in inherent existence itself. And the consciousness that analyzes reality realizes there is no inherent existence. So as long as the other two criteria are believing that this exists and that exists, there's a mistake going on still. We need to see that everything dependently arises, does not exist inherently. Everything is in flux and can change and interacts. Lama Tsongkhapa gives us an example of this, where he explains that an ultimate mind, and a mind that understands that things do not exist inherently, will not contradict the conventional assertion that pleasure and pain arise conventionally from positive and negative actions. An ultimate mind would never contradict that, would say that's so. Whereas an ultimate mind will contradict the conventional assertion that pleasure and pain arise from a creator God or a primal essence. That the pleasure and pain has nothing to do with our actions, but it's somebody else is determining that and making it so. And a mind that analyzes the nature of reality will say, I'm contradicting that. I don't agree with that. So that's important to add that third one in there. Other than someone who has realized emptiness directly and who is trained in the philosophical tenets, everyone lives with the sense that things have an inherent, independently self-existent nature. We just have that feeling about stuff, that sense about things. Therefore, only this third criterion will cover all the possibilities. And unless an object fulfills all three criteria, then it cannot be said to exist conventionally. So there it is. It takes some thinking and getting used to, and going back and reading over these. But those are the ways, those are the three criteria that Prasangikas use for determining whether something conventionally exists. Shall we move on? Or
Well, I think, as you said, that doesn't make any sense to me on the surface of it. So I need to think more about it and read your notes about it. But so if you want to move on, move on. I'm at the end of the day, what I was hoping for myself, not anybody else, myself, is that logicking out the philosophies and teachings of the Buddha would lead you invariably to the conclusion that this path is the only path. I'm still ending up with this idea that you just have to buy some of this stuff and just say, yeah, I think it's a good idea and I like it and I'll believe it. And so I'll practice it. And, but can I actually say it's correct, true, whatever? I can't. And
Something you just said bothered me and I must pipe in because I don't think any of us would agree that this is the quote only path. And so I'm kind of alarmed that you would use that term only path.
I said, for me, Kavita,
We're looking for a valid path that gets to something that we each aspire to. And as I've mentioned before, I am completely on board because all these forerunners are all about non-harming. And that's the bottom line for me. I'm on a path that promises 100% non-harming all the time in every way.
However,
So that only
Kavita, what I would say
is a loaded word.
that's a fine way to be on board with it. However, I go further with that there's logic behind non-harming.
I'm taking.
Yeah, but when Brian said we can't logic it out, I would disagree. We can logic
Okay,
it out.
but what do you think about Brian's use of the word only?
That's fine.
It's
in a way-
no one would claim that, not even the Dalai Lama.
In a way,
would
what
claim
you could
that.
say is the only path that's going to work is one that includes wisdom and compassion in it. So you call it by any name you like.
And it does not have to be Tibetan.
You don't have to call it
As
Tibetan
per
Buddhism,
law
but it's going to
of-
be some path that uses that. You have to have the logic behind this,
Of course you do. I'm
loving compassion.
only zeroing in on Brian's.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Well, I am worried about it.
It's not your thing to worry about.
Look, you're facilitating a class, and if you let a statement that somehow we're espousing this is the only path and not saying, no one's saying that.
No.
I'm not saying that Christopher is saying that, Kavita. That don't get me wrong. I tried to say that for me, my expectation of studying the Buddhist philosophy and what the attraction was that you could logic out why it is the correct path for me. And I'm saying that even with all the teachings, and again, I know I'm a neophyte, so I get it. I'm not there yet. And and I have a lot more to learn. And I think about things in a way that maybe is a little bit challenging for understanding some of the teachings. But at the end of the day, I still am left at the present time with this feeling that you can logic some of the stuff out. You can negate some of the things in ways. But at the end of the day, if you come to me and tell me that you have to have a non-conceptual self-realization of emptiness. And, Christopher was just talking about the news, half of our country believes one thing, half believes something else. I mean, they each think they're right. And I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong, but I'm just saying that's their fundamental belief. And they have it for whatever their reason is. I'd like to have the belief that is the not just the correct belief for me, but the correct belief for the world as it, or the universe or the galaxy as it exists. And so it continues to exist. So, but it seems to me if I just look at the data of how many people believe different things and have true hard feelings about that belief, and I'm supposed to have a realization in my own mind of something, then I can convince myself. That's why I was asking the earlier question. I can convince myself I had that realization. I mean, I can't for me, but there are other people who could probably convince themselves that they have a realization of this, that, or the other thing, or I am an arhat, or I am a bodhisattva, or I am, I read it, I say it, I do it, so Tracy's yelling at me here, but
I just want to next here. Who says, now if y'all can hear me, but who says you have to become enlightened or have this realization this lifetime? You may not.
nobody says
But
that.
it's like you're climbing, Mount Fuji, you're Mount Everest. You're at like the first 10 feet of it. You're like, we're climbing. We've said, okay, we're going to climb. Now you're climbing. You're making progress climbing. And it's like, well, how will I know when I get to the top of the mountain? Well, you'll know when you're at the top of the mountain. You'll just know it. you know, there won't be any more steps to take. You will have become, you know,
But if I can't know that
And
the first 10
experience.
steps are
It's
the
not gonna
correct
happen.
steps, then why should I take step 11? I mean, you
well,
know,
but they are, and you have to trust that they are.
oh,
the
I have to
correct steps.
trust. That's what
You
I
have
just
to
said. I
trust,
have to
but
have
you can
faith that this is.
infer- You can infer climbing
I mean,
up towards the peak of the mountain will get you towards the peak of the mountain and eventually to the top of it. But you have to climb in order to reach the top. And you're just at the very beginning.
Where confidence or confidence comes in, it comes in through the wisdom teachings in Buddhism. And that's where I have developed the confidence. And I would say it can be logicked out. You can, through logic, see the validity of the wisdom teachings. Even if you can't directly experience it, you can logically go, that is making sense. That sounds right. Now, the other thing I would say is that the Buddha never said that samsaric existence was the place to be. Samsaric existence is founded on confusion, ignorance, lack of wisdom, and incredibly afflictive emotions. And so the fact that this is going on right now and continues to go on should be no surprise whatsoever, given the nature of what this kind of existence that's driven by ego self-grasping produces. It produces what we're seeing. It produces what we're experiencing. So the point is not to change the outer world based on the samsaric world, the samsaric existence. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to overcome that kind of existence and then help others overcome that kind of existence as well. We're not going to fix this problem that exists in cyclic existence within cyclic existence itself because of the mindset of what cyclic existence is. It is afflictive. It's afflictive emotions and it's cognitive obscurations. That's what it is. And it results in what we see. And so the path is not about fixing this. It's about fixing our own mind and then helping others to fix their minds, which will generate a different kind of conventional existence, not a samsaric one. And that's just another thing to think about. You know, it's another thing to think about.
Well, I'm appreciated. I didn't mean to distract the.
No, wow, oh my God, Brian, the questions are necessary. They're good. You're supposed to, you know, if you have, anybody should ask questions. Because how are we going to figure this out if we don't?
And I think Brian is not the only person with this question lingering. I think there's been a lot of individuals in the past that has gone to this dilemma. And I think a lot of people go to caves, meditate for 12 years. They still come out with confusion. Or, so like I said, it's a very valid question Brian has. Kavita has her own point. I have my own point. But I think it just, the time and patience and dedications probably help you lighten up towards a proper path, I would say.
Yeah.
But I think this is a type of thing that there's no solid 1 + 1 = 2. There is probably something that we have to have a lot of time to realize, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, many of the teachers say, take the long view, because if you think you're gonna do this in 10 years.
So there shouldn't be a frustration in other point. That's my point is, to me, there is an answer. But when will I get it? Like Tracy said, I don't know, maybe not in this lifetime or in this lifetime, who knows? But like Kavita said, I think there is an answer, but it's very difficult to answer the exact answer. And then Brian's frustration, I feel the same way too sometimes. But it's a very, you know, I think the patience and the time and the dedication and the meditations probably help us.
Sure. You know, as I've said earlier, we're going to go into, after, we still have at least one more of these two truths to go, maybe more. But after we finish with the two truths, I'm going to start bringing into our sessions the actual model of the mind. And this, I believe, will help us a lot. It'll help us understand how our consciousness is working and how it's oh, it is broken down into levels that we normally never even think about. And it gives us a way to understand our mind and what we're doing with our mind, which is, can be kind of a revelation. And it's basically coming from all of the experiences of these yogis throughout the history, and what they have found to be so. And when you do these exercises and understand what's going on with the model of the mind, there's more logic in it, and you can see the validity of it, and you begin to go, wow, oh my goodness, this is what's been going on with me. And I didn't even realize it. So I say, we have to have some kind of confidence. And I think we all can have confidence that the idea of compassion and loving kindness is a good one. We all can see that. We can feel that that's the case. But then we have to have also equal confidence in the logic that is behind the wisdom teachings that the Buddha presented. And that's going to take that will be more difficult for us, because it's going into territories that we don't even have a context for. Because we're coming from beginningless ego, self-grasping, afflictive emotions, cognitive obscurations, and we don't think we have those to the degree that we probably do have them. And so it requires humility and a certain kind of confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, based on testing it out, trying it out, thinking about it. So I believe we just have to keep, what does Robina say? Just keep trucking is what she says. Just keep going, just keep moving, just keep doing it. And it will get clearer. But we all have different propensities. We all have different backgrounds. We have beginningless lifetimes that are all different. So some of us have certain strong propensities in one area, and others very strong in another area. So we're going to see things or experience things in a slightly different way, maybe in a big different way. But that doesn't mean that we can't all learn. We can't all change. Of course we can. That's the point. That's why impermanence is such an important topic in Buddhism. We can change. We just put the right causes and conditions there, and a change will occur, for the good or worse. It just depends on what we're looking for. I don't think we're looking for suffering, most of us. We make the mistake that we think it's not suffering, but it winds up being suffering. So I think we're going to have to, we're going to have to leave it there. But those are, very important questions, Brian. I'm always grateful for your questions, and I'm glad you asked them, and I'm glad you interrupt. It's wonderful. It's what needs to happen, because we need to talk this through, and we need to discuss it, and we need to find a way together to sort of move on with this and see if we can make sense of it. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to do some closing prayers?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. I don't know, but John, let's. I'll just read these dedication prayers in English. May the precious Bodhi mind, the mind of bodhicitta, not yet born in us, arise and grow. And may that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And may the view of emptiness, this profound view that the Buddha presented to us, not yet born in us, arise, and may it grow. And may that born have no decline, but continue to increase forever. And then the very, very last one is, in all my lives, may I not be separated from true, authentic spiritual teachers, lamas, and so enjoy the splendor of the Dharma teachings, fully perfecting the virtues of all the levels and the paths. May I speedily attain the state of Vajradhara, the primordial Buddha that we all have the potential to become. Hallelujah. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you. Same to you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.